August 1945. Somewhere in the English countryside, 10 of Germany's most brilliant minds sat trapped in what they believed was just another wartime holding facility. They called it Farm Hall, an elegant country house with manicured gardens and comfortable rooms. But it was actually a prison designed for one purpose: to extract secrets. These weren't ordinary prisoners of war. These men were the architects of Germany's nuclear program, physicists and chemists who had spent years chasing the same impossible dream that haunted every major power during the war. A weapon so devastating it could end conflicts with a single blast. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have imagined, was that hidden behind the wallpaper and beneath the floorboards were microphones capturing every word, every whisper, every private conversation. British intelligence had orchestrated this elaborate trap perfectly, and now they waited, listening in silence, hoping these men would reveal just how close Nazi Germany had come to creating the ultimate weapon. The scientists moved freely through the house, discussing physics over breakfast, debating theories in the garden, completely unaware they were performing for an invisible audience. Then came August 6th, a date that would split history into before and after. A British officer entered the drawing room where several of the Germans had gathered, his face grave, his manner unusually formal. He cleared his throat and made an announcement that seemed impossible, almost absurd. The Americans had dropped a new type of bomb on a Japanese city called Hiroshima, and that single bomb had destroyed everything, the entire city simply gone. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then someone laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound that broke the tension. Several others joined in, shaking their heads at what they assumed was obvious propaganda. One bomb destroying an entire city? Ridiculous. The Allies must think they were fools to believe such an outrageous claim. Werner Heisenberg, Germany's leading theoretical physicist and the man who had led their nuclear research, was particularly dismissive. He'd spent years studying atomic fission, understanding the theoretical possibilities, calculating the enormous challenges involved. If such a weapon existed, he insisted, they would have known about it. The scientific community wasn't that large. Breakthroughs of that magnitude didn't happen in complete secrecy. But the British officer wasn't joking, and he wasn't leaving. He stood there, patient and solemn, insisting that every word was true. The bomb had used atomic energy, nuclear fission, the very science these men had dedicated their careers to understanding. Slowly, the laughter died away. The scientists looked at each other, really looked, and saw their own dawning horror reflected back. If this was true, if the Americans had actually succeeded, then everything had changed. The war was over, yes, but something far more significant had happened. Humanity had crossed a threshold into a new and terrifying age, and Germany, despite all their research and all their brilliant minds, had been left behind. As the reality sank in, the conversations grew more intense, more desperate. The microphones hidden throughout Farm Hall captured everything, preserving for history a remarkable moment of scientific and moral reckoning. Otto Hahn sat alone in one of the rooms, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. Hahn was the man who had discovered nuclear fission back in 1938, the fundamental breakthrough that made atomic weapons theoretically possible. His research had opened Pandora's box, and now, 7 years later, that box had unleashed destruction beyond imagination. The recordings captured his voice, thick with emotion, as he spoke to himself and to anyone who might listen. He felt personally responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. His discovery, his contribution to science, had become a tool for mass killing. The weight of that realization crushed him, and he spoke openly about whether he could continue living with such guilt. Other scientists tried to comfort him, insisting that pure research couldn't be blamed for how others used it, but their words rang hollow even to their own ears. The question hanging over Farm Hall, unspoken at first but growing louder with each passing hour, was simply this. Why hadn't Germany built it first? They'd had the science. Many considered German physics the finest in the world. They'd started their nuclear program in 1939, calling it the Uranium Club, bringing together the nation's top minds to pursue atomic energy. They'd understood the theoretical principles, conducted experiments, built research reactors. They'd absolutely known, that an atomic bomb was possible. So what had gone wrong? Where had they failed? As the night wore on, the scientists began dissecting their own program with the brutal honesty of men who had nothing left to lose. Germany's nuclear research had started with great ambition and genuine possibility, but it had been strangled slowly by the very system it was meant to serve. Resources that might have gone to nuclear research were diverted to more immediate military needs. Hitler and his generals wanted weapons they could use now, not theoretical devices that might be ready in 5 or 10 years. Rockets, tanks, submarines, these were concrete, proven technologies. An atomic bomb was a gamble, expensive and uncertain, and as the war turned against Germany, gambling became a luxury they couldn't afford. Funding dried up. Key scientists were reassigned to other projects. Laboratory facilities were bombed or closed. By 1942, the nuclear program had effectively stalled, continuing in name only while the real work ground to a halt. Now these same scientists sat in an English country house, listening to news that the Americans had accomplished what they could not, and the bitter taste of failure mixed with something else, something harder to define. Heisenberg stood at a blackboard someone had provided, chalk in hand, surrounded by his colleagues. If the Americans had really done this, he needed to understand how. The physics was clear enough in theory, but the practical engineering challenges were immense. How much uranium would you need? How would you enrich it to the necessary purity? How would you trigger the chain reaction fast enough to create an explosion rather than just melting the material? The scientists worked through the calculations together, their voices rising and falling as they debated possibilities, corrected each other's math, proposed and discarded theories. The hidden microphones captured it all. This strange seminar taking place in a prison, where Germany's atomic experts tried to reverse engineer their enemy's greatest achievement. Slowly, painfully, the picture emerged. The Americans must have used uranium-235, the rare isotope that made up less than 1% of natural uranium, or perhaps plutonium, an element that didn't even exist in nature and had to be created in nuclear reactors. Either path required industrial facilities on a scale that was almost unimaginable. You'd need huge factories to separate uranium isotopes or produce plutonium. You'd need thousands of workers. You'd need billions of dollars and years of focused effort. Germany, fighting a war on multiple fronts, its cities being bombed, its resources stretched impossibly thin, had never come close to that level of commitment. But what shocked them most was the secrecy. The Americans had built entire cities, employed over 130,000 people, spent something like $2 billion, and done it all in complete secrecy. German intelligence hadn't even known to look for it. As the technical discussion wound down, the conversation took a darker turn. Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, one of the younger physicists, spoke up quietly, suggesting something that made everyone uncomfortable. Perhaps, he said carefully, It was actually fortunate that Germany hadn't succeeded. The others stared at him, waiting for an explanation. Von Weizsäcker didn't flinch. If Germany had built the atomic bomb first, he continued, Hitler would have used it without hesitation. There would have been no warning shot, no demonstration to encourage surrender. London would have been destroyed. Moscow, any city within reach. Millions upon millions of deaths, and the men in this room would have been responsible. The silence that followed was profound and painful. They all knew he was right. Hitler's regime had already demonstrated its capacity for mass murder, its complete disregard for human life, its willingness to pursue genocide as official policy. An atomic bomb in those hands wouldn't have been a deterrent or a tool of last resort. It would have been used immediately, repeatedly, enthusiastically. Some of the scientists tried to defend themselves, insisting they were just researchers, just following orders, just doing science without making political decisions. But the recordings captured a different truth. These men had known what they were building. They'd understood the implications. And somewhere deep inside, perhaps not consciously acknowledged until this very moment, part of them felt relief that they had failed. Days passed at Farm Hall. More news filtered in. A second atomic bomb had been dropped, this time on Nagasaki. Japan was preparing to surrender. The war that had consumed the world for 6 years was finally ending. Not with conventional victory, but with a demonstration of power so overwhelming that further resistance became meaningless. The German scientists understood they were witnessing a fundamental shift in human history. Warfare would never be the same. The country that possessed atomic weapons would dominate global politics for generations. America had won that race, and Germany, despite its scientific prowess and early start, had lost. The recordings from those final days at Farm Hall captured conversations that ranged from technical analysis to philosophical reflection to simple human grief. Some blamed poor leadership, the Nazi regime's short-sightedness, the lack of industrial capacity. Others wondered if fate had intervened, if perhaps the universe itself had conspired to keep such weapons out of Hitler's hands. One scientist suggested that maybe the world was safer this way, that maybe Germany's failure was actually humanity's salvation. But one question haunted them all, captured again and again on those secret microphones. Could Germany have actually built it? Could they, with different decisions, different priorities, different leadership, have been the ones to unleash atomic fire? The answer, though they didn't fully know it yet, was almost certainly no. Germany's nuclear program, despite its impressive roster of scientists, had never truly been close to producing a working weapon. They lacked the industrial infrastructure, the resources, the sustained focus necessary for such an enormous undertaking. While America built entire secret cities like Oak Ridge and Los Alamos, dedicating unprecedented resources to the Manhattan Project, Germany's program had sputtered along with minimal support, constantly fighting for funding and attention. But sitting in Farm Hall in August 1945, these men didn't have that perspective. They believed they'd been tantalizingly close. They believed that one different decision, one changed priority, one moment of clearer vision from their leadership might have altered everything. The microphones captured their regret, their confusion, their complicated mix of relief and disappointment. These recordings remained classified for decades, finally released to the public in 1992, nearly 50 years after they were made. They revealed something remarkable about that pivotal moment in history, showing us not just the technical details of Germany's nuclear program but the human dimension, the thoughts and feelings of the men who had tried and failed to build Hitler's atomic bomb. Their words, preserved on magnetic tape and later transcribed, became a unique historical document, a window into how scientific minds grapple with the moral weight of their work, how nations compete for ultimate power, and how the race for atomic weapons shaped the world we inherited. The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima killed somewhere between 70,000 and 140,000 people, either immediately or in the weeks that followed. Nagasaki added tens of thousands more to that terrible toll. The war ended, but the atomic age had begun, and with it came an arms race that would define international relations for the rest of the century and beyond. The German scientists at Farm Hall were among the first to truly understand what had been unleashed, to recognize that humanity had acquired the power to destroy itself completely. Their reaction, captured on those hidden microphones, showed shock, yes, but also a complex mixture of scientific curiosity, moral anguish, professional jealousy, and genuine fear for the future. They had lost the most important race of the modern era, and they would spend the rest of their lives wondering what might have been, grateful and horrified in equal measure that history had unfolded the way it did. The truth they discovered that August, the truth that still echoes today, is simple and terrifying. Whoever controls such power controls the future, and the responsibility that comes with that power weighs heavier than any of them had imagined.